Dala, 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 dala. Welcome, welcome, welcome back. So, today I wanted to talk to you about the expression of spirituality and tradition and culture through language. And here, contrary to what is usually done, talking about African languages and what they're meaning and all of that, I am going to expand and talk to you about how spiritual expression can go beyond languages. We all had, or most of us, or some of us, had experiences where you encounter somebody who doesn't speak the same language as you, but despite that, you manage to communicate, you manage to understand what the person is trying to tell you, their name, what they're looking for, what have you. This is because spirit goes beyond language. Even sometimes, just by looking at the expression of the person and the context, you are able to know what they want or what they're heading to or what they need at the moment. So it's a matter of being open to understanding. It's a matter also of paying attention, and most of all, going beyond words, going beyond what's been taught to you in school, basically. And I will not even say that it's about so much about body language and all of that. It's about this additional sensing, this additional knowing that we all have. When you see someone in need, you don't need to necessarily see the body language. Sometimes it's just the expression. Sometimes it's just a feeling, a knowing within you that tells you this person needs something, and that tells you this is what this person needs. So sometimes you do have to trust yourself about those things. But here I wanted to give you tangible examples of why we don't necessarily need to decolonize languages and all of that. I mean, there's have been a lot of academic and don't get me wrong, I'm a lawyer. I've done a lot of studies. I almost, got into a PhD program. So I have my share of researching, and I love researching different subject matters and everything else. But when it comes to spirituality, your academic pedagogical side has kind of needs to be step aside. This may be why some of you have problems with your intuition, because your intuition does not function with logic. It may point you to things that logically do not make sense, or logically do not you cannot arrive at this conclusion logically, but your intuition is pushing you to there. So that's why you really have to distinguish that. But here I'm specific in terms of the language. So you may be thrown in a situation, in a place or a country where you don't understand what the person is telling you, or you could even be, in the same town, in your town, where you meet somebody that doesn't understand what you're saying, and spirit may speak through you. Your soul may be speaking to that person's soul, and you get to understanding. And here, there's nothing to do about sexuality or sensuality or anything like that. It's purely a matter of communication, or be able to communicate. So this brings me, because this video is basically a precursor to some of the things I will share with you on the Bamileke culture, specific concepts that exist within the spiritual Bamileke culture or tradition. So I need to do this video so you understand the videos to come better. So when I'll take the example of Cameroon with the Bamileke tradition. Cameroon was first discovered by the Portuguese. Then it became a German colony. Then, when Germany lost World War II, it was basically cut in pieces between France and England. And so this is why we have inherited this bilingual system, bidual system of French and English. And in the separate part of Cameroon, people started to speak English, and other part they were speaking French. Now, many people and many academics were going to start saying, that, oh my God, you learning the colonizer imposes language on you and deprive you from so much and so on. This is not true. This is not completely true. This is a very reductive picture that's being painted, especially for Cameroon, because if you go to Cameroon even today, you will see there are hundreds of languages, of native languages. Okay, that's still, but people still speak. My own father, when he was growing up, he learned at least five to six Cameroonian languages. Okay, and those are not dialects; those are languages. And so It proves that despite the fact that we were colonized, we still maintain a lot of ourselves, including our culture and our spirituality. Now, it's not because some people stopped participating in it that all of that disappeared. But we still do have a lot of those native languages present. And now, even though English and French were brought in, the Cameroonian people, what they did, and I think you can see that in many other African countries, and I'm going to be specific on the French, but I also seen it in English with Pidgin. So with French, when you go to different African countries, especially if you're Cameroon, I lived in Ivory Coast and observed the same thing. I haven't observed it so much in Senegal, but in Ivory Coast and Cameroon, I can see it clearly. The French, if you go to school and you need to write, an academic French letter, yes, the French is going to be exactly like the French in France, meaning the syntaxes, the grammar, everything like that. It's learned properly. At least it was when I was there. It was studied properly. So if you receive a letter from a Cameroonian who speaks French in Cameroon, writing you a letter that has been through school, or to college, the French is going to be limpid, is going to be great. Now, in the expression on a day-to-day basis where people speak French, they do not speak the French in France. They speak a different kind of French that is changing based on what country you're in. So if you're in Cameroon, they are going to be using French words, don't get me wrong, and sometimes other words are mixed in there, but the meaning to those words are not the same as in the regular French language. And this is why if you come from France, you go to the market or you go to the street, people may be speaking French, but you don't understand what they mean. You understand the words because those words are French words, but you're not going to understand the meaning. You may be very confused. And the same, when I went to Ivory Coast, I even have myself to adapt and restart learning the French that they use in Ivory Coast. They're just words that don't mean the same thing. They're different things that don't mean the same thing. So, for example, the word maki in Cameroon, maki is reference to going and disappearing in the bushes because the maki was where the revolutionary, the people who were fighting for independence, disappeared in when they didn't want to get caught by the French police, but the French government. When they were fighting for independence, when you will say that your father died in the Maquis or your father went to the Maquis, you know that he was running for his life because he was fighting for independence. Okay? Now, if you go to Ivory Coast and you start talking about Maquis or asking Maquis or people telling you should go to the Maquis, they're not talking about going to independence. They're just talking to you going to a restaurant, going to get some food, having a good time. So from one country to the next, the same French word, the same word has different meaning based on the culture. And it's important for you to understand that because if you're just coming with your academic knowledge of colonialism and you're not putting in factor in the reality that in countries such as Cameroon, learning a new language was not a big deal. The average person back then had to learn several languages just to get by. You go from one village to another one, there was a different language. And instead of feeling petty or feeling like it's too hard or incapable, it was natural for people to learn and be fluent in more than one language. So being bilingual was very beneath us actually because most people spoke many languages and it was natural to do so. You were sent to a village, you start learning the languages. Your kids had friends from different ethnic groups. They learned the languages or they learned free words here and there. And that's how people grew up. My father, as I mentioned to you, he traveled throughout Cameroon learning many languages. And I mean, he may be an exception because even with foreign languages, Russian, German, Spanish, what have you, it was very easy for him to know languages. Now, I don't want you to take that as a barrier, meaning like, oh, maybe you're somebody who's not that social, or maybe you're somebody who doesn't do well learning languages. This is where I'm asking you to focus on the spiritual aspect of the language. And the local people, history and spirituality is going to express itself in the language. And you can even see that in the US. You have English, and yet, African Americans, they managed to have a subculture with uh, the same English words that have different meanings as well. So you can have the meaning, if you take the word brother, which in English means a sibling, somebody who's your relative, the son of your own parents, your brother. In African American culture, we often say, "Oh, this is a brother," meaning a kin, somebody who we are not blood related necessarily, but somebody to whom we have some type of difference of affection, some type of respect. This brother right there, my brother, and this concept we find it also in Africa. It's very common that you will go to the market or you will go somewhere else, and someone else who doesn't know your name addresses you as my brother, come here. Addresses you as your brother, even though you're not blood related. So those spiritual concept, because it comes from spirit, it's not necessarily coming from the culture alone itself. For me, it's an expression of the spirituality of a certain people. So we can see that where black people are on the planet, we tend to find the same type of relating to each other. If when I go to the market, when I used to go in Cameroon, for example, to the market with my mom, somebody was trying to sell something or selling tomatoes or what have you, he will look at my mom and say, "Auntie." He will call her auntie, or he will. Some of them will literally say, "Mom, come see what I have for you." And it's a way to express, first of all, to recognize your status. That means when they're calling you auntie, when they're calling you mom, that means you look older than them and they're giving you, providing you that respect. The same way they will want their mom or their auntie to be called by someone else. Instead of considering you a stranger, we tend to be a lot more careful, a lot more full of care for people who are kins, who are in our families. So so you see now when you walking down the street and somebody calls you, "Oh, my sister, come here," or sister such and such, or I've seen this fine brother or this fine sister. So it's a mark of respect, and it's a mark of bringing you together to show you that you're part of the same tribe, you're part of the same people, you're part of the same nation. Okay, and it's a reflex. It's something that comes naturally. Nobody has to force it on you or has to teach you. Sometimes you even utter it without thinking about it. And that's part of the expression of the spirituality of our people. And this goes beyond languages. So no matter how brother or sister or mom is translated into every different languages, most of the time you will reflect it and you especially feel it. You're not only going to hear the words, but you will feel what's behind those words. So it's very important for you sometimes to detach yourself from what you've been taught, what you've read in certain books, and experience and observe what's happening here and what's happening around you. And so that's why sometimes I understand there's different movements and people wanna make things more complicated than they need to be. This is why for me, there's no need to decolonize languages. Languages are there to be an expression of what we have to say, of what we want to share, so forth and so on. And the language would always reflect the words or the expression of the speaker. And if there's any ambiguity, then ask the speaker for clarity. What do you mean by X, Y, Z? What do you mean by this? And then the speaker will explain and clarify that for you. So this is why for me, in the dream world, no matter what words comes out, if it's a language, a gibberish that I don't understand, I don't stress myself over that because it's not that is so much important, but the knowing that I have when I hear those words. What is the knowing that I have within me when I hear those words? And that's going to go beyond somebody who looks like they could be threatening or somebody who's being, that knowing to me is more important. And this is a premise for you to understand that if you do go to Africa at some point, no matter what country you will go to, even if it's in an English-speaking country, because some of you only speak English, you will see that the English that's being spoken there, even though it's the same word, does not have the same meaning. And I'm talking about on a daily basis. I'm not talking about an interaction where you're coming from the airport and you're looking for a cab. So a cab is going to be a cab. It's going to be a taxi. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking more on the day-to-day basis. If you go to the market, they may call you auntie at the market. You're coming to buy something, they may call you auntie to show you respect. They may call you ma, ma such and such, or they may call you mother, to show you respect. It's not to belittle you, it's not misogynistic or anything like that. It's to show you respect, to recognize that you're a woman, to recognize that you may be someone's mother, or that you could be someone's mother. So that's where the respects come from. And so you shouldn't be offended by that. And before you get offended, please always start to think about what's the context. You are in a different culture. You're here to learn. You are here to explore. And you have to come there with an open mind because you don't know this culture, you're learning this culture, basically. So before you start placing judgment and taking it personal to you of something that's going on within the culture, make the effort the same way you do in school. When somebody's saying something to you and saying, math 2 plus 2 equals 4, you don't get offended. You sort of understand what they mean by 2, why is it 4, etc. And that's the same approach that you should be taking. You should be taking it with an open mind, an open heart, and a spirit of curiosity in trying to understand why are they using those such and such word, and what do they mean by that. And even if you do feel offended at some point, if you feel offended, it means there may be a need for clarification somewhere. For you to understand why they're doing this. Maybe they have values that are not the same as yours, and their values is based on an objective and an end goal. So sometimes it may just be a matter of you to clarify that and to ask, what do you mean by that? What purpose does that serve for this individual or for their culture or for their community, or what have you? And then you'll have a better understanding of what's happening. And so I hope this is helpful. Please let me know if this is clear enough, because the upcoming videos are going to go into different concepts they are using. I'm going to doing literal translation for you to understand. But those concepts, I needed basically to help you understand that even though I'm using words that you use on a daily basis, they're not going to have a meaning, especially when we talk about spiritual things in the Bamileke tradition. One example, if you go see, I did a video a while ago on fetishes. You see, if you just go along with the definition of a fetish in the Western English speaker society, fetish is going to be something very deviant, foot fetish, things like that. But here we're talking about African fetishes that's completely different. So it's the same word, completely different meaning that you're not going to find in the Webster dictionary, or not necessarily. Okay, so that's what we're going to go back to, but I thought that I didn't do this video before, and some people may be confused. When I'm talking about fetishes, I'm not talking about this psychological, mental illness, but rather I'm really talking about concepts and things within the African traditions and spirituality. All right, I hope this was helpful. If you have questions, please leave them below, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.